Welcome to the ultimate 1 week Florida road trip itinerary. This is going to be quite long, but I will try to keep it as short as possible. So this is a road trip that JP and I did. We started and ended in Orlando because he just hadn't really seen much of Florida. Here's a little bit of the itinerary. He had been to a few places around Central Florida, but that was it. But I went to college in Florida and some of grad school. My grandparents have lived in Florida most of my life. Half my family lives there now. So we are always going to Florida, always going all over Florida. So I decided to take JP to all of my favorite places that I recommend, and I put them all into a little itinerary. So day one, I recommend starting in St. Augustine. This is the oldest continuously inhabited European established settlement in the contiguous US. So it's like the oldest city, but like kind of by these very specific standards. I have the highlights from this particular day of the road trip in this YouTube video. This will have more of like the video content rather than like just photos that are in the blog post. So I recommend starting off the day with a horse-drawn carriage tour. We always do these when we go to like historic cities. New Orleans and Charleston were the main ones I could think of off the top of my head. Other cities have like the trolley tours, which I definitely recommend too. Those are usually like hop on, hop off throughout the whole day. We've done that in like Savannah and San Diego. But it's a great way to just kind of get the layout of the city, see kind of some of the highlights, get extra information from the tour guides, because they'll tell you like what places are overrated or something to check out that most people don't. And then you can ask any of your questions as well. Here is kind of what it looks like from ours, and then you see the carriage up ahead. For lunch, I loved Meehan's Irish Pub and Seafood House. We did fish and chips. I always get a side of mac and cheese. We had bread pudding. It was just delicious, like typical like what you would expect from an Irish pub. For the afternoon, you'll want to hang out around St. George Street. This is kind of the main area of St. Augustine. What's nice is it's pedestrian only, as you can see, and this is where they just have all the different restaurants and some kinds of different attractions and gift shops. They have like sweets shops and things like that. One of the top activities is the Citygate Spirits Distillery. It's a free moonshine, vodka, and rum tasting. You just have to pay a tip. And the apple pie moonshine is like one of their best-selling things that they have there. You could really spend the vast majority of your day here. They also have the oldest wooden schoolhouse in the US is here as well. Castillo de San Marcos, this is right across the street. This is an old fort. What's really interesting is if you go up close to it, you see a lot of it is built with like the concrete is like hardened shells, because that's just kind of what is in the area. You can walk around this whole fort for free. You could do a tour if you want to go like inside, but it's sufficient enough to just kind of do the outside if you want. For dinner, I recommend the Teeny Martini Bar and also Isabella's Bar Cuba. So the Teeny Martini Bar is very popular. It's at the Casablanca Inn, but it's open to the public. You can kind of see that it's just kind of out here in the main area, so you can do, people watching, and has a nice atmosphere. And then Isabella's Bar Cuba, I went here specifically for the sangria, and they do fill the whole glass, so it's a good thing for like evening activity. Something also popular to do in the evening is to do like a cemetery or ghost tour. We've been doing these in a lot of cities lately, even when they're not like super old historic places. Like Virginia Beach itself isn't like a historic town or anything like that, but it has like long history, so they have a lot of ghost things. So ghost tours here are very popular. I highly recommend them. And then where to stay, the top place I would recommend is the Hilton St. Augustine Historic Bayfront. It's right there in town, so that way you can park your car there. It's right there. You don't have to worry about, driving into the city to do stuff. You can also go back to your room throughout the day if you need to, and it'll be super convenient. Day 2, I recommend driving down A1A specifically, so don't hop on I-95, but drive A1A so that you're driving along the coast and go down to the Canaveral. This video here has pictures and videos from that particular day of the itinerary. So in the morning is when you'll do the driving. It takes about 3 hours, but it's very scenic the whole way. I recommend having lunch at Sunny's Barbecue if you've never been, or even if you have been. I just enjoy it. It's like a regional chain. It's kind of spreading quite a bit now, but it's somewhere that we've always gone in Florida, so We usually like to share meals when we go out to eat. So we'll do kind of like a platter of things. I like the pulled pork or like pulled pork sandwich. And then you get garlic bread, you can get mac and cheese, you can get baked beans. I really like their cornbread and their mashed potatoes. And they also have like a variety of barbecue sauces that you can sample. So Sonny's Barbecue is just a great place to go to. Then you'll want to spend the rest of your day at the Kennedy Space Center for the most part. They have indoor and outdoor exhibits. They have a lot of interactive stuff. You can do add-on things like dine with an astronaut, and they have extra tours that you can go on. There's just lots of really cool things to do here. For dinner, I recommend going over to Port Canaveral to like the Jetty Park. And it's the area where all like the cruise ships come in and out of. If you put in your GPS to like Exploration Tower, which is a cool museum to check out if you have the time, there's a few restaurants over there. There's not really one in particular I recommend over another. They're all kind of similar. So if you just want to like look at the menus, look at the prices, and just kind of see like what fits your vibe, like they're all fine. Then an evening activity if you want to be out and about, other than just going to like Cocoa Beach, like the pier area. I really like Golf and Gator mini golf. They have a Mario Kart go-kart track. They also have 2 mini golf courses, and they have some small gators and other animals you can feed. Something I've been seeing more of at mini golf courses, because we saw this in Maui too, is that they'll have a wheel to spin when you get up to it, and it'll give you some sort of like advantage or disadvantage to play with on that hole to like make it more interesting. So it'll say like have a player stand anywhere they want while you make a putt. Sometimes it'll say like, oh, you get like a 1 putt advantage, or it'll say like play it normally. You obviously don't have to play with spinning the wheel or not, but it keeps it interesting if it's like if you've been before, or just to spice up the game a bit. And then where you'll want to stay that night is the Hampton Inn at Cocoa Beach, Cape Canaveral. There are like 1,000,001 places to stay here, with it being such a popular cruise terminal. So there's a lot to choose from. I recommend just kind of picking a brand and sticking with it when you travel, so you can earn perks and rewards faster, and free nights and things like that. Okay, next up is day 3. You will continue your way down A1A and explore Florida's Treasure Coast. So kind of each section of Florida is broken up into different types of tourism districts. So like the Kennedy Space Center, Port Canaveral, Cocoa Beach area, that's all called the Space Coast because that is where the Space Center is. But once you get south of that, that is the Treasure Coast. It's definitely less visited for sure, but more popular for like locals. But if you're driving down A1A, you're going to pass through it. So it takes about 2 hours to get down to this area. If you have time, I recommend checking out the Navy SEAL Museum. There are a couple days a week that it's closed, so just double check. But they have like that boot camp obstacle course that you've probably seen in like movies and shows and stuff that you can do yourself. So that way you can kind of see like how difficult it is, or you can also see like how good you might be at it, because you never know what special talents you might have. So that's something you could do like before going to lunch, because it's on kind of like the north end of that. For lunch itself, I recommend Manatee Island Bar and Grill. They have a little bit of everything. I've been lots and lots and lots of times. My favorite is actually their chicken lettuce wraps, which was like a new thing last time that I went. So I don't know if it was just a special or if it's always going to be on their menu. But other things they have that are good that we've gotten a few times: shrimp po' boy with onion rings, coconut shrimp. I believe this was gumbo and not jambalaya, but it could be. I don't know. Fish and chips. These are the chicken lettuce wraps. These are plantains. I absolutely love plantains. I will get them everywhere in Florida. Key lime pie, I will also get that for dessert every single place that I go in Florida. And then here's kind of the view of the little inlet that you have a view of. This was a cloudier day, but you get the idea. After lunch, it's a little bit of like choose your own adventure depending on what is kind of most interesting to you. You could kind of do a combination of a lot of these though. The beach I like best in this area is Hutchinson Island South Beach. If you put in like Hutchinson Island South Beach parking lot is where you'll find it. It's small, it's quiet, it's pristine, and they have bathrooms. So this is a great place to go for beach time. The Port St. Lucie Botanical Gardens they're not huge at all, so it's easily something you could do in like an hour. Here's kind of the entrance to it. Here's a little volcano we built at the beach. And then another activity you could do is Summer Crush Winery. So you could do a little wine tasting. It's all the muscadine grapes, so they're very like sweet, fruity wines for the most. That seem just kind of more like juice than it's nothing like California wines or anything like that. These are all ones that like I personally wouldn't really drink them as like wines, but I would maybe make like a wine slushy or like use them for like a sangria or something like that. But they have like outdoor live music. They have like lawn games, like they do like giant checkers and cornhole, and they have like a food truck. So it's good to just kind of be like out and about and hang out. Then for dinner, I recommend Dolphin Bar and Shrimp House, which is in Jensen Beach, which is kind of like the southern end of the Treasure Coast. So all day you're just kind of making your way farther down the coast. This is pasta that I had, shrimp pasta. We've had a lot of things here. So shrimp po' boy. This was like a blackened shrimp with plantains and beans. This is calamari. This is a brat with like crispy onion straws. And then I think these are bacon wrapped shrimp. Do I have it here? I think these are like the bacon wrapped blackened shrimp. But everything here is good. We've had a little bit of variety over the years. And then where to stay, I would choose the Home to Suites in Stuart, since that's kind of the south end area as well, so you're not doing much of backtracking. Home to Suites is a new-ish brand under Hilton. It's like modern and trendy, but on their like lower end budget wise, so it's affordable, but none of the Hilton things are like motels at all, so they're all still like good quality and affordable. Day 4 is when you will make your way all the way to Miami. Again, I highly recommend driving A1A the entire time. If you drive on I-95, you're missing like 90% of the point of this road trip. This is when it starts getting more into the like big mansions and things like that. Like when you get to Palm Beach, Boca Raton, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami will be much bigger areas, lots more restaurants, lots more people, but still like interesting to drive through. I do have a shorter itinerary that just covers kind of this portion of like only driving A1A. That's more like a 5-6 day trip. And then this video again has just that specific day of the trip where we drove from Port St. Lucie to Miami when we did it. So in the morning, you'll make your way down to about the Fort Lauderdale area. That will take about 4 hours. You'll see all these different mansions along the way. There are also stretches where there's not really much of anything. It's just, just the ocean out there, and it just looks nice, especially if you're driving out on a sunny day. It's very nice and scenic. For lunch, I do recommend making a small detour to Skyline Chili. If you've never been or never heard of it, this is based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and they are known for chili spaghetti, but they also have other things. But this one in particular, once you get to Fort Lauderdale, you'll turn right and take that road about 10 miles inland, and Skyline will be right there, and then you'll take that same road back and then keep driving down. But this is what is called a 5-way at Skyline. So a 3-way would be just spaghetti, chili, and cheese. A 4-way is if you add beans or onions, and then a 5-way is if you add beans and onions, and then they also have their own hot sauce, and you always get oyster crackers too. So you can load it up with all these things. They do have a chicken chili now, which is kind of the essence of Skyline, but not quite the same. I recommend, if you've never had it before, trying the original. And then this is a cheese coney. So it's just a little hot dog with chili and cheese, usually mustard and onions as well. I always just get it without the mustard because it's not my fave, but sometimes if it ends up with mustard, oh well, but my preference is to not have it. You can also get this thing called a chilito, and it's like a burrito that just has chili in. But you can also do it's kind of like secret menu, off menu type of things. Sometimes they'll just straight up ask you though. You can get, usually it is like chili and cheese in there, but you can also get sour cream, you can get spaghetti in it. There's lots of things you can do to play around with it, but those are kind of our go-tos. We'll usually share like a combination of all of those things. From there, it is another 3.5 hours, shockingly, from Fort Lauderdale to Miami. They are right next to each other, but it's mostly a traffic situation than anything else. This is the most congested section for the A1A by far. We did this during June, so it's not even like it was like height of spring break or anything like that. It's just but the vast majority, I would say probably an hour of this, you'll be in Miami, driving through the South Beach area, and then taking a bridge that takes you kind of back inland towards downtown Miami. That is kind of the bulk of this portion. But along the way, Miami is known for their Art Deco architecture, so you will get to enjoy that along the way as well. What I recommend doing for dinner is going to Versailles Cuban restaurant. It is more like inland when you go to the downtown area. It was very full when we went, so I took that as a good sign. What I specifically wanted to try a Cuban restaurant in Miami, since that is what Miami is known for. So I obviously got a Cuban sandwich, and this was very delicious. I highly recommend even just getting just that. And then JP had the roast pork Cuban style, which is this here, and it came with, I think it's pronounced yucca. I don't know if it's yucca. And then it had like this rice and beans thing with it. And then you also get this garlic bread as an appetizer. They also have a little like takeout window that's like a bakery type of thing. So we got some like different fruit-filled empanadas and things like that to take back to our hotel for later. And also just to have like as a little snack for the next day as well. Where to stay? So we stayed at the Homewood Suites, Miami downtown Brickell. It was actually a studio room, which is not very common for Homewood Suites, but with it being like downtown in a city, that kind of makes sense. But you still get the whole, most of the kitchen type situation. So you have a mostly full-size fridge and freezer, microwave, stovetop, dishwasher, sink. But instead of the bedroom being closed off, it's just here around the corner. And you do have this pull-out couch here and like a full bathroom and everything. So the room was perfectly fine. I just was not expecting it not to be like a separate bedroom. And then the next day we visited Biscayne National Park and then continued driving on to Key West. So an hour south of Miami is Biscayne National Park. It is mostly an underwater park, so you do have to kind of book an excursion to see it. I think if you just have a boat or rent a boat or something, that you can maybe go there. I don't know. But you want to go through the Biscayne National Park Institute, and they have a variety of tours of all kinds of tour lengths. We wanted to kind of see the most of the park as we could as possible. So we did a 6-hour tour that was snorkeling, a picnic lunch, and stand-up paddleboarding. But they also have shorter ones where it's like 3 or 4 hours where they just kind of take you around on a boat and you don't necessarily do any particular activities. This video here has more photos and videos from this full day of the trip. So the vast majority of your day is going to be this excursion. Again, it takes like an hour to get there. You need to check in 30 minutes before the tour time, so you need to be there by 9:30. And you do have to bring your own picnic lunch. So I recommend getting a pub sub from Publix. That's the local grocery store. I'd also I personally prefer Gatorade, but like a drink with electrolytes. On the boat, they have an ice water container, so you don't necessarily need to bring plain water, but like maybe something with electrolytes since you're gonna be like out in the sun and doing activities. And then also, salty snacks, something like chips, that travels well. Something else that we do when we have to bring something more like non-perishable is the tuna salad cracker kit, since everything is already like sealed and you just gotta eat it like once it's opened. So those are very good for transporting easily. You'll definitely want to have lots of sunscreen. I got 2nd-degree burns on my hands even with reapplying SPF 30 like throughout the whole thing. So I would try SPF 50, keep reapplying, have hat, sunglasses, cover like shoulders and any sensitive spots, hands, stay in the shade, things like that. And then this was the boat that we were out on. It was the 2 of us plus 2 others and then the guide. And this is how clear the water was for like the snorkeling. And then this was the little key where we had our picnic lunch. It was a very fun excursion. So we got back from the excursion at 4 o'clock and we drove down to Key West, which took about 3 hours. It's very scenic the whole way because you're just driving like bridge to bridge to bridge, like out in the middle of the ocean, connecting all the keys together. This area here is kind of why like you may be better off doing a shorter excursion just to have more time for this area. But we got to our hotel at 7:30, checked in, dropped off our bags, and then our hotel had a shuttle that would take you into town. So that left, it was like every hour on the hour, like on the half hour or something like that. So it left exactly at 8 o'clock. It took us 15 minutes to get to Mallory Square, which is kind of like the main downtown kind of thing, cruise port, all that kind of stuff. So we didn't get down there till 8:15. So it was a very late dinner for our standards. We usually eat like 5:30 to 6:30 range. However, had we done a shorter tour, one of the 3 or 4 hour just kind of like cruising tours, we would have been here at a normal dinner time. This is what the view from Mallory Square looks like at sunset For dinner, we went to the Conch Republic Seafood Company. I had eaten here with my grandparents before, so I knew since it, like, you know, it was late night, it was super busy, we had to put our name in somewhere, so I was like, let's go here because I know it. So they're known for their conch chowder, which is this. It looks kind of more like a chili. I actually didn't care for it. I don't know if it was conch in particular that I didn't like or just something else, but not my favorite. I also had some coconut shrimp. JP had the fried shrimp platter with fries and coleslaw. We shared a strawberry mojito, which was so good after just like being out on the water all day long, having a long day. And, you know, Key West at night, you know, it's warm and like a little bit breezy and you still have a little bit of the humidity. So like it feels nice. And this was a nice refreshing drink without being heavy. And then dessert was my favorite. It was a hot pineapple upside down rum cake. And then also came with some ice cream on the side. And for this trip, we stayed at the DoubleTree near the airport. So Mallory Square is pretty expensive to stay in. I feel like most of the times I've ever looked, the standard hotels are all like $400, $800 a night. And we really tend to spend like $125 to $150 a night on a hotel when we travel. So again, this is where sticking with one particular like hotel brand as much as possible helps to earn perks and rewards and free nights and whatever faster. So we stayed here at the DoubleTree. I think we still paid like $180 or $165 or something, but it was like the cheapest for Key West, even though it was a splurge for us. It's only about 10-15 minutes outside of town. And since they have the free shuttle, like it was all we needed. There was no reason to stay in the middle of the town if we had a free shuttle to get us there. If you get like the hop on hop off trolley pass, there is a stop next door as well. So you could take that around if you're gonna stay longer in Key West. Day 6 is when we actually get to do sightseeing around Key West and then also go up to the Everglades. So this video here has everything from that day. We woke up bright and early. We wanted to take the first shuttle into town, which was at 9 a.m. We had to be leaving by 1 o'clock to get up to go to the Everglades on time. So we wanted to be able to see and do as much as possible. Great way for seeing towns, like I mentioned, for St. Augustine is to do a little tour. Key West has a slightly different thing. It's called the Conch Train Tour. This started running at 10 o'clock. So we had an hour to kill. So we did a little bit of sightseeing on our own of places that I had like remembered to like from a previous visit. So we went by Sloppy Joe's Bar. This is known for being a place that Ernest Hemingway liked to go to. We walked down Duval Street and then we went to the southernmost point buoy, which I'm so glad we did beforehand because when we were on the conch train later and came back around, the line was like down the block. So you definitely want to get this picture like early in the day before it gets busiest. And you can kind of see in these photos the burns that I had on my hands. And the rest of me looks perfectly fine because I did the sunscreen all day. But I guess it just came off my hands. Like, I don't really know. And then it was a little bit on the very top of my knees. So that was fun. But this is what the conch train looks like. It is just a little train. It makes a few stops along the way. If you have the time, a couple other things that I recommend doing is Harry Truman's Little White House tour. It was like his winter home. It's basically like if they had built the White House in Florida. So it's more Floridian style, but when you tour it, it is still very presidential, like you can definitely tell. And then Ernest Hemingway's house is also a very popular site. He had this 6-toed cat, and all the descendants of that cat are still, you know, just roaming around, and it's just kind of a cool little house to just walk through as well. And then again, if you want to add on an extra day, I'd go out to the Dry Tortugas National Park, because then you'd be able to hit all 3 national parks in Florida, which are all clustered there in the very south of Florida, which is interesting. We didn't have time for that. The problem is that we planned ours last minute, and there was no availability to get out to the Dry Tortugas because you have to take like a ferry type of thing or like a seaplane, and everything was booked up during our trip. For lunch, we went to Margaritaville. We typically don't recommend or go to like chain restaurants unless it's like regional or specific to the area. But if you've never been to Margaritaville, this is probably the one to go to. Like Key West is Margaritaville. So what you'll want to get when you go there is definitely margaritas. the cheeseburger in paradise and definitely key lime pie. Like I said, I will get key lime pie literally everywhere. The other place did have pineapple upside down cake, which I absolutely love as well. So this is a great lunch option if you've never been to Margaritaville. For the afternoon, the next thing you'll do is drive up to the Everglades. So you'll take that same scenic drive back up. There's only one way in and out of Key West. It'll take about 4 hours because you're going back up north towards Miami. And the very last tour of the day leaves at 4:30. So that's why you want to arrive before then. The airboat tour portion is about 40 minutes. And then they also do like an educational presentation and tour around the property for like 20 minutes. So you'll be there for about an hour. It's really the best way to see the Everglades and, without as much effort on your own part. There is, if you have more time on the way up to here, if you stop about an hour short, there is a visitor center there with like some boardwalk trails that you could do. And then you could come up here and do this. After that, we drove up to Tampa. I probably wouldn't squeeze all of this in the same way that we did, but we were short on time and needed to get back to Orlando eventually. So we just drove after this up to Tampa. We figured it would be a late night. We didn't really have dinner plans exactly. We kind of figured we'd just stop somewhere along the way. We got most of the way to where we were going and just decided as we got closer, I was like, well, I used to live here for many years, and there was one restaurant in particular that I was like, he should definitely go here and we should treat ourselves. So we did that. We went to the Salt Rock Grill in Indian Shores. JP had the shrimp Louis salad. I did not. That's just not my kind of thing. But I did have coconut shrimp. We did get a complimentary garlic bread with like the olive oil and Italian. I had truffle mac and cheese. And then we also shared this scallop crusted sea bass with mashed potatoes. So they split the plate for us. So this is like a half portion. And then where to stay, if you are able to do the splurge, the Don CeSar in St. Petersburg. It's this big pink hotel, very historic, classic hotel. Is a great splurge if you're able to. And then day 7 for us, this was more a like personal road trip. So I know this isn't a part of an itinerary that anyone else would have interest in, but we drove up to St. Leo University, which is just outside of Tampa, and I took JP around to all of my college things, and then we just drove over to Orlando afterward to end the night there. Some other things that you could do. So you can explore Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater Beach. You could go to Busch Gardens, which is here in Tampa. There's a zoo in Tampa. You could also just go over to Orlando, go to Disney Springs, City Walk, resort hop around Disney. You could even, a couple hours north of here is Crystal River, where you can go swimming with the manatees. I did this in college, which was also really fun. It's like a little snorkeling thing. This is the Hotel Flor in downtown Tampa that I stayed in on a recent trip, which was really cool. So the ending is kind of choose your own adventure, but it also leaves time too, where if you spent more time in Key West or stayed down in the Everglades kind of thing, then on this day gives you time to get up to Tampa. So that's why the extra time is kind of built in that way, in case you needed extra time, because some of the last couple days were really packed in there. So some frequently asked questions: how many days are needed for a Florida trip? You could go to Florida for 2 days if you wanted, but if you really want to drive around and see stuff, our actual trip was 9 days, because we did a day in Orlando at the beginning and a day in Orlando at the end. So the road trip portion was only 7 days. And then we had 2 days of just hanging out in Orlando. If we had been able to go to the Dry Tortugas, we would have added on an extra day to see everything. I would plan, there's a couple things I would tweak about this. If I was able to spread it out like closer to 10 days, there's a couple things I would do. Definitely Dry Tortugas. I would do a little bit more in between Everglades and Tampa, going out to the beaches there, probably going up to Crystal River, swimming with the manatees before circling back to Orlando. So there are a few things that could be added to this, but this is great if you need to keep like the full thing under a whole week and you don't really have that extra day to spare. What is the most scenic drive in Florida? So A1A is the coastal highway. It's also, now it's actually officially called the Jimmy Buffett Memorial Highway, but A1A is what people are more familiar with. So, and it's shorter. but that is the one that goes all the way down the entire east coast of Florida, like right along the beach. So you're stopping like every stoplight in the beach towns. That's very scenic. And then also when you're driving the Florida Keys would definitely be the most scenic Florida drives. How long does it take to drive the full length of Florida? So Florida's a pretty long, if you're driving along I-95, which goes parallel to A1A, so it goes all the way down the eastern side of Florida, but it's more inland. That takes about 8.5 hours. A1A would take about 10 hours to go through those same places. If you're going along the Gulf Coast, because the Gulf Coast curves up into the Panhandle, that would actually take about 12 hours. But then you'd also see like Naples and Fort Myers, which were kind of skipped on this itinerary. Something to keep in mind when visiting Florida, there is this thing called a Go City Pass. And it's basically like an all-access attractions pass. Orlando has one and Miami has one. We tested these out in San Francisco. We tried both kinds. So you can get an all-inclusive pass, which is like you get a certain number of activities, or you could do the pass by day and you get unlimited activities per day. It's basically you're bundling attraction prices so that you're not paying full price at every single place that you want to go to. But they also include fun stuff like escape rooms that you might not normally do, or like mini golf and laser tag and other things like that. But it definitely has like the museums and tours, and usually like the hop on hop off transportation type things are on there. They're really great to use if you're like doing something other than a theme park day, to just kind of check out other things in Orlando and Miami that you haven't done before, and it just makes it more affordable. That's really all that I have for this. I do have a digital download version of this that is much more precise and concise. That is just a little PDF download. It's like one page for each day. I want to say it's like $7. Okay, I clicked on it. I lied. It's $9. So if you want to download that, that is an easy way to keep this full itinerary just kind of at your fingertips. And I did have some things in here that I skimmed over earlier that if you've made it this far, it is worth adding. I do have, that's not the one I wanted to show. I do have a free guide on my favorite free things to do in Florida. So this can help you kind of fill in your time on your trip to Florida without lowering your budget or saving money on some things so that you can spend more on others. It just asks for your name and email, and then it'll send you a PDF guide. This one is free. But yeah, that is everything I have for the 1 week Florida road trip itinerary.